Pete's asked me to read out this afternoon's programme, the fact that he's still in 2030. We've got three talks this afternoon. Toby Driver's going to kick off with Pembrokeshire crop marks. Then we're going to hear about Wiston, and then we're going to finish off from Marion about St Patrick's Chapel. So a really good afternoon. Now Pete says that we'll keep to time because he'd like us all to be out of here by 4 o'clock-ish, because apparently after that time they have to pay for the security by the minute, and he says it doesn't come cheap. So without any more ado, I'd like to ask Toby Driver, who I don't think is a stranger to any of you here. Toby, aerial investigator at the Royal Commission, and I doubt whether there's anybody in this room who hasn't got his book, and if they haven't, they darn well should have. The amazing thing is that Pembrokeshire continues to produce and surprise with new results from aerial photography, both new sites and new things about known sites. So looking forward to this greatly. Toby.
Thank you, Helen. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all back, and it's my job to keep you awake after lunch, which we'll see how we go. And there's a bit of an historical twist at the end, which you'll be interested to see as well. Well, what I'm going to show you this afternoon takes us back to those hot, dry days of summer. Not only this summer, but last summer. It's hard to imagine nowadays, of course, with all the rain. But some of the amazing discoveries that came out across Pembrokeshire. And it's a surprise to me, even, that we're getting big new sites coming out of the county. Absolutely astonishing. It shows the value of repeated aerial reconnaissance in this part of Wales, and indeed across the whole of Wales. We'll look first at how we approach aerial reconnaissance in hot summers, how we know where to go. We'll look at then some prehistoric discoveries in South Pembrokeshire and North Pembrokeshire. We'll look at what the Romans are doing at the moment, and if we can tell anything more about that. Look at some medieval sites, and we'll finish on a couple of the Pembrokeshire airfields. We currently do our aerial reconnaissance in a light aircraft. Haverfordwest Airport's one of the few airports in the UK offering hiring light-term aircraft for aerial photography nowadays, correctly licensed and so on, a safe operation. So we do a lot of work out of Haverfordwest nowadays. We pack in all our equipment to the plane. We've changed the camera for a new Nikon camera, so we've got two really big professional cameras. Fantastic resolution still on those for photographing the landscape. GPS, first aid kit in case we come down the mountain, and a seawater beacon in case we come down in the sea. Neither of which has happened, which is good. The aircraft cockpit is noisy, busy, a lot of vibration. The pilot's taking care of the air traffic control duties and so on, and we're looking out of the window on the left. We can be up to sort of 4 to 5 hours plus lunch, and then another 4 to 5 hours on a really busy day. There are many ways to get airborne nowadays. UAVs, drones, unmanned aerial vehicles are one of the really good ways now to get low-level aerial photography. You can get three-dimensional modelling of the landscape as well. So these little drones are fantastic, and probably the best way nowadays to get a good shot of the site that you know you want to get photographs of. The aircraft is still a very good way to get across Wales on more wide-ranging work when the conditions are just right. You know, an average flight out of Haverfordwest in the summer will go down to the Vale of Glamorgan, Newport, Cardiff, Chepstow, Lunch and Welshpool, up to Clwyd and Wrexham and down to Haverfordwest again in about 5 hours. And so it's still a very useful way to get quickly around Wales. Some of you will have seen this already, but this is a diagram here illustrating how a perfectly well-built Iron Age fort, in this case here, possibly about 200, 300 BC, can become completely plough-leveled and invisible in the modern landscape. This bank here is built out of stony soil or rock, and we've got a deep ditch through the subsoil or the bedrock. By the 1950s or 60s, the farm was improving his pasture for cultivation. So that lump and bump, the earthwork is vanishing rapidly. And by the present day, it's a completely level soil profile. There's nothing on the ground surface at all to indicate that site exists. But you still can't get rid of the ditch. You can't really get rid of a lot of the bank material, or in the Romans' case, a Roman road, despite all that ploughing. And in a hot, dry summer where the crops are stressed, they'll grow taller and greener over ditches, and they'll wither out and parch and ripen early over banks, giving us this green and yellow marks, a bit like an X-ray. A good example of that is the site near Aberystwyth, which was newly discovered in the hot summer of 2006. This is a Bronze Age, early Bronze Age barrow, two concentric ditches clipped by the modern hedge bank, so we have an indication that it predates the hedge bank. This is found in a field cut for silage, so the long grass has been harvested, there's been a bit of rain and then a continuing drought. So we're seeing regrowth in stubble. And that's a little yellow circle, an upstanding barrow mound, parching out. And we were lucky enough to visit this site on the ground with the landowner, there she is in the middle, and we could take accurate measurements from this crop mark as it exists, about 48-metre diameter. But that's just a thickening of the grass and the nettles and the weeds. A bit of rain and that'll vanish in 2 to 3 days. And we haven't seen it before or since. So timing is of the essence. And we'll see in this talk how great monuments that once existed in the Pembrokeshire landscape, here's Somerton Camp at Puncheston, big concentric Iron Age farmstead with an inner enclosure here, perhaps there was stock in the infield, protected overnight, how those sites can vanish completely from the landscape and become a footprint of what they were, a crop mark. This is one on the other side of the Teivi, at Corrents, where the Dyfed Trust has done some geophysics a couple of years ago. But we have just the foundations of these sites, but here you get new information. Just inside the gate, you have a little slip gate here for perhaps get the livestock through into the infield, a back gate here as well, and then geophysics brought up a roundhouse in the middle later on. So these sites can vanish, remarkably so. Pembrokeshire's lost some big monuments in its time. Here we are over Herman's Hook, Parkstone at Clarbeston, which was discovered by Terry James in 1989. It's been showing last summer and this summer a concentric Iron Age farm of some magnitude, big complex defences, a huge outer area of territory, but with a right angle here. Why? Perhaps it butted up against somebody's land. It's interesting to have that detail there. But this is vanished. It now exists only in farmers' soil, basically, below the field. So these big monuments have gone, but we're still getting more. Excavations by Ken Murphy and the Dyfed Trust and Harold Mighton over the years have shown how much can still survive below the ground. This is what the crop mark is being produced from. There's another photograph of Terry's of the Berry Hill Promontory Fort near Newport, excavated in 2007, revealing enormous rock-cut ditches below the soil, infilled with deep stratigraphy. Quite how these Iron Age people were cutting through this tenacious bedrock, it's still hard to understand. You can see there's virtually no stratigraphy left across the main part of the site, maybe half a foot of topsoil down to bedrock. So that's what we have under the soil. When we have a dry summer, which is not very often in Wales, maybe every 5 to 6 years, though we've had 2 warm ones in Pembrokeshire, we have to know where to expend our flying hours most sensibly. And every year from April to August from the Met Office we get soil moisture deficit readings for the whole of the country. These show the difference between water evaporated from the crop and how much it's drawing in from the soil, so crop stress. And where it begins to hit 100, we have crop marks showing. You know, if you're in an aircraft, you'll have crop marks showing. This is the grid for 30th of July 2013. Burning drought over Pembrokeshire, Anglesey, Gower, Chepstow area. But if you're flying in the wrong place over Lampeter, you won't see timing. Last summer, 2013, we discovered an entirely unknown Roman fort near Brecon, which hit the press. This is what we saw out of the aircraft window, a brown on yellow crop mark, virtually fully ripened, almost invisible. We can rebalance the red, green and blue values of the photograph to draw out that crop mark of the Roman fort. Here we are with massive Roman defences, a Roman marching camp here, the road inside the fort showing, fossilised by hedge banks on this side here. So now we have a plan that we can publish of the Kevin Brunnock Roman fort. But this is the 1st of August 2013. The Welsh Government actually overflew this for their vertical coverage on the 14th of July, 2 weeks previously, and there's nothing there. So within 2 weeks it's appeared, ripened, and then begun to disappear again. And it's the only arable here for miles around, most of it's grass. So we have to be there in the right 2 weeks, otherwise we'll see nothing. Well, we had 2 really very dry summers. This is last July, 16th of July, over Templeton in Pembrokeshire, a burning drought. There's Broadhaven in the distance there, Templeton Airfield. We had a very long lead into last summer, freezing April, May and June, sunny but cold, and then we had these hot winds in early July which burnt everything off. And you can see everything parched from miles around. You're going to see where the runways have been removed from the airfield, parched grassland, and crops in the distance showing variation, different colours, so we know archaeology may be visible there. And nowadays, with these digital photographs from West Wales particularly, where we have these fine differences between the yellows, the greens, and so on in the pasture, we rebalance a lot of these photographs, we rebalance the red, green and blue values of the images, and that just punches up all the detail. You can immediately see the old red sandstone crop marks through the fields there, field drains and other lost details, so it gives us a lot sharp information about what's on the photograph. And you'll see a lot of these black and white images in the talk. And this year again, 2014 was equally hot across Pembrokeshire. Sites I've never seen before, flying on the 7th of August, the former Stackpole Court, demolished in 1963. We still have the gateposts standing up in the pasture, but there's the difference between the rebalanced photograph and not. You see the whole floor plan of this great mansion, which has vanished from the Pembrokeshire landscape. So incredible what appears on a dry summer. Our work started last July. After a couple of months of fruitless looking, everything started to appear at once. And here we are in South Pembrokeshire near St Ishmael's. There's the Haven, North Haven, lovely blue water, and all these crops now. The wheat ripening up, showing coloration, geology, old paleo channels, and prehistoric enclosures. Here's a new one appearing at Bicton, with a nice gateway here in the corner of the field. So a new defended enclosure down near St Ishmael's. South Pembrokeshire, not so many known. And then moving then towards Dale and Mullock Bridge, more surprises. This is the main road down, or the main road, a country lane down to Dale here. And there's the turn off to Marlois and the Scoma embarkation through here. And so we have an enclosure there, another enclosure here on parched grassland. So the grassland and the arable fields beginning to show new archaeology. So this is Mullock Bridge's new defended enclosure. It's a new hill fort on a smooth hill shoulder above the hamlet there. And the fine enough detail revealing a palisade just inside the ditch there, perhaps backing the rampart which has vanished. So really nice detail there, and all the subsurface geology showing as well. There may be more pits and so on in there as well. And the poster child of the summer in Pembrokeshire was the Mullock Bridge West Promontory Fort. Beautifully formed, brand new again, with a lovely little Iron Age promontory fort against a bluff here, with a gateway, a second enclosure here, built in straight sections on this side, almost hexagonal, very interesting, and a ditch here through here as well, and ripening crops there. We came back over this, it was showing in 2014 very nicely. Again, when, as if this wasn't enough, we have another enclosure on the other side, huge angular site coming through here, a new roundhouse or some small barrow visible, just cut by the ditch, and further small circles appearing up here as well, perhaps unenclosed roundhouse settlement as we have further towards Marlois and Scoma Island. So some really nice surprises coming up. Passing by Dale Airfield, this summer there's the remains of Dale Airfield, the runways, a probable concentric Iron Age enclosure emerging in fields just near Dale there. Suggestions of an outer concentric enclosure and other ditches linking through, but there's never fully ripened enough to see what was going on here, but a very neat small site nevertheless revealed there. But some bigger surprises. The whole of, in 2013, the whole of the peninsula, Deon, Marlois, Little Haven was parching out, and we're surprised to see this. There are 58 known promontory forts in Pembrokeshire at the moment. This looks like it's the 59th, Borough Head. The big curving bank here should have been an indication, I suppose. It could possibly be an Iron Age fort. You seem to have a big dark crop mark here on the outside, potentially a ditch, and quite a substantial bank here, potentially a fossilised Iron Age rampart. And the clincher seems to be a faint curving ditch in here as well, echoing that outer defence. So it seems pretty good that we have Borough Head, we have another Iron Age promontory fort just around from the havens there on the north flank of the coast. More surprises around Milford Haven, Pembroke Dock, where it's always slightly difficult there. We've got slightly poorer soils around sort of Tenby, west to Peru as well, the anthracite fields. But at Upton Castle here, we have a new enclosure, which is brilliant. Curvilinear ditches, two curvilinear ditches coming through here. Again, we presume later prehistoric, but with a square enclosure within, with rounded corners, potentially Roman military, but working with Geoffrey Davis, I know that that's got a sharp angle here, and the Romans did everything by the book. So it's not probably good enough to be an undiscovered Roman fort. It's probably just another phase of enclosure or a contraction of the site during the Romano British times. But a really nice enclosure we got south, way down in South Pembrokeshire at Rosscrowther, surveying there between Freshwater West and Angle. Never had any Iron Age or prehistoric sites down there that are visible from the air too well. But here we have a new concentric enclosure. We have many of these on the Pembrokeshire, Carmarthenshire sort of belt, through the lowland belt there. An inner defended enclosure, an outer enclosure, a lovely gateway coming in here. The ditch is thickening up, flanking the gateway, and then possibly the back side of this outer enclosure here. Here's the entrance to the big Rosscrowther refinery. We're very lucky that these big buildings haven't obliterated this. Again, that's the photograph as taken. You can just about see it from the aircraft, but we have to rebalance those values to see the full range of the archaeology. Now, there's been some interesting work by the Dyfed Trust over the last 5 or 6 years on Creaky Eye chem ice, which was mentioned briefly in Mike's talk before lunch, where we have a series of early Bronze Age round barrows, highly prominent in the landscape, accentuated and focused upon by what appear to be Iron Age or maybe early medieval enclosures, but not only defended enclosures with sort of corridor and antenna entrances, but complex ditch systems as well. Very, very interesting site that we're just at the beginning of understanding here in North Pembrokeshire. What was interesting in the work last summer and this summer, down in the havens at Rosepool, we had equally odd and unusual enclosures coming up. Here we are, a large circular or oval enclosure here, coming up to a hill summit. Below it another circular enclosure, and then ditches striking off through here and around here. Now what's interesting for this site is this is a site of a scheduled round barrow, woodland round barrow here. On the Dyfed HER we have Eastern Tump Place Stone, and the site of a standing stone just to the west. So it does rather look, this may be a plough level barrow, this circle here. This one's far too big for that, and these ditches are unusual. So we may have a big lowland focus for Iron Age ritual down in the havens here. So we're just at the start really of appreciating what this might mean for lowland Pembrokeshire. And one of the big surprises from Wiston, Wiston's good for surprises at the moment, is last year an enormous concentric enclosure. Terry James coined the phrase concentric antenna enclosure. We have an outer enclosure, an inner settled enclosure, and there's an antenna or corridor linking the two. And there's Wiston Village in the background. This is a few miles off the eastern end of the runway, so people have been flying over this field for 4 decades. This is the first time it's visible, first time the regime has changed on the field. So we have an outer enclosure, an inner enclosure with an entrance, a second enclosure with a segmented ditch cutting across here, and then formal straight ditches with an entrance here. And we can look at that from the other side. And around the other side we have a big formal interned entrance here as well. A massive formal entrance into the enclosure and an annex on the back of that central enclosure as well. Very, very busy, very complex, but absolutely enormous. It measures 4 hectares in size, this site at Conklin Hill. the largest lowland Iron Age enclosures that you know about in Pembrokeshire. And look at it in size here. It dwarfs the Mottram Bailey at Wiston, and it would almost swallow the Roman fort as well, which is interesting. It's as big as Foyle Tregarlen on the Preseli Hill, so you can visualise its size. But perhaps these formal ditches at the other end here, the straight ditches that are on the western end, perhaps that's some sort of Roman intervention, I'm not sure, but it's an interesting site to have with the recent discovery at Wiston of the Roman site as well. Moving to North Pembrokeshire, we had a number of discoveries here too. Just about a mile north of Castell Headlease in 1996, my predecessor, Chris Musson, discovered a site, a crop mark enclosure, and photographed it. This is my photograph in 2005. Never very satisfactory. A ragged old ditch hanging off a promontory with some pits. Never cause for much concern or alarm. In 2013, the whole character of the site changed. We had very, very clear crop marks all the way through. And Mike showed this in his talk before lunch. A couple of months after the summer, we began to look at this in more detail. We had an unusual circular enclosure hanging over an escarpment with double ditches here, but single ditches segmented with many entrances all the way around. You can see the interpretation. Crucially, an outturned entrance here and on the west side here as well. Only seen in one other place, which is the Ogmore or Corntown enclosure down in South Wales, which is thought to be Neolithic or an unusual form of Middle or Early Bronze Age site as well. So it's possibly a Neolithic enclosure, this as well, with another enclosure here and two big barrows, round barrows here too. This is a very interesting reinterpretation of the site we've known about since 1996. And that was the same as the Bank D enclosure in the Preselis. That was discovered in 1990, but not really occasioned much interest until 2005. Further discoveries in North Pembrokeshire. Now, since seeing a couple of Mike's talks on the Stonehenge project, we realised that Carrick Sampson at Longhouse was an area of interest. A lot of experts have looked at this and concluded it was one of the earliest potential incursions of early Neolithic tomb building in Western Britain or Wales. So we're interested to see if anything else showed up around here. Here we can see the great sweep of arable land near Longhouse. This is in 2014, harvesting in progress. But you can see all the colours and variations showing up in these fields. Blotches, patterns, you know you're going to see something in these fields if you get over them. In 2013, in this field just across from the chamber tomb, we had discovery of a large enclosure 30 metres across, looks like a ring ditch, potentially a burial monument. And this summer we've come up with two further circular enclosures here, potentially more settlement orientated. Most interesting as well, a potential pit cluster just at Longhouse there as well. And there's Carrick Sampson tomb there. This is the enclosure we came up with south of Longhouse, a lovely, perfectly circular enclosure with an inner, what looks like an inner palisade trench as well here, but almost too neat with no formal entrance that we can see to be a sort of settlement. So we're presuming maybe a burial monument. It requires more work. This is about to vanish for another year as the farmer's making progress cutting his crop. So that will disappear again. But just to the south of Mynydde Hunt, an array of crop marks, a slightly more unusual or overweighted enclosure, potentially an Iron Age site, but who knows really, potentially an entrance here. And then a grid of fields, potentially medieval or earlier, coming through here, but confused by washes in the geology as well. And then over on another hill, Mynydde Hunt East, close to reservoirs and fields, we have the suggestion of a third enclosure, a good curving sort of ditch there with an entrance, and a D-shaped annex, a bit like Congland Hill. But just vestiges of it, you've got deeper soil and so on, infusing the picture here. But a lot going on in the fields around Longhouse. And an added bonus this summer, there's one of the barns at Longhouse, and in the field we can see pits, very distinct circles here. And we can sharpen those up, and it looks like we have 1, 2, 3 pairs of pits or post holes, another distinct one here, one off here, another 2 potentially here, but a little bit difficult to see. But so close to what was formerly a passage tomb from Francis Lynch's excavations, potentially another structure, a Neolithic structure here as well, but who can tell. In such wonderful conditions, we're also photographing all the other headlands and all the other fields, even if we can't see anything, as a record, because we may not get these conditions for another 5 years. Here's the headland from Longhouse down to the promontory fort, and when we remove or rebalance the colours, we can just about see through the soil, like an X-ray really, but I can't tombs or henges. It's a real shame. But we can really analyse the landscape below the plain while we have it there to see before it starts growing back with all the rain. The Romans, Jim will talk about this later on in the afternoon, the Romans have been exciting us a lot in the last couple of years in Pembrokeshire. This is a map I published about in 2007. We still need a fort at Whitland. We've got one at Wiston now. We still need something else to the west here. And there's a lot of people looking, of course. So somebody is going to strike pay dirt and hit something good there. Need one up here as well. There's plenty we need. But the direction of the Roman road now is an obvious question. This is the Roman road photographed by Chris Musson, pioneered by Heather and Terry in the 80s, photographed by Chris Musson in 1996, west of Whitland, the characteristic flanking quarry pits dug by conscripts or slaves to surface the road. So that designates as the Roman road rather than a pipeline. Now here it is, the first time I've seen it since I started flying in 1997 more with a quarry pit. And here's the dig team at Wiston, which we'll hear about later on, excavating on the site of the extramural settlement there. So we know what we're looking for west of Wiston now. Bizarrely, last summer, 2013, up near St David's, we've got this line of quarry pits diverging from a country road to the north of St David's. Nobody's saying that it's a Roman road, but it's difficult to know what else it could be. That's a fairly characteristic pattern, unless this farm was digging rock and so on from the field. So that's North Pembrokeshire, approaching St David's, but not sure what that means, really. Where it should be is at West Dairy Farm, west of Wiston, which was picked up by Chris Musson in 1996. There's the Roman fort, there's Wiston, and there's West Dairy Farm. And there's often been visible a linking parch mark between fields here. It could be a plowed out field boundary, that's the problem. But it seems to be a good stony parch mark, flanked by ditches, but you do get that when hedge banks are removed as well. West of West Dairy, there's the linking section. This is the hedge bank. This is under parch conditions this year, with all the colour stripped out. No quarry pits that I can see through there, even though we're getting all the paleo channels and the fissures in the bedrock. And then it diverges, there's West Dairy, it comes along the country road, and then the country road changes direction. When the country road changes here, we have a continuation of a parch mark through here, that could be a hedge bank, into this area of heavily grazed grassland here, approaching Withybush. There's that section where the road diverges, and I can't see anything in here at all through here. No quarry pits, no agate at all. We've got some parched circles here, which may be feeder troughs, but they could be barrows, it's difficult to say. There's another one there, it's like feeder trough positions. So nothing to go on here. I mean, we should be, with the fort at Wiston, so most of the Romans could do to build a road through here that we could see. It's not very fair. And before it started raining in early August around Withybush, Haverfordwest, everything was parched. We saturated with the photography. That's where we should be landing. We're going around here. All the colours stripped out. There's a double ditch line coming through here. There's a drainage ditch or a damper area continuing on the line of this hedge bank here. But I can't see any Roman roads. I can't even see any barrows or any archaeology. So there's more to look for here. The only potential indication, well, I'll come to that in 2 seconds. This got me excited this summer. I was bouncing up and down in the cockpit when we had this. This is at Tal Benny, where we have a coastal church with an early dedication, potentially a parch mark of a curvilinear enclosure underneath the church here as well, with a ditch on the outside. But we did look good enough to be a Roman coastal station, but the angular corners were bothering me because they do everything by the book. Was that a gatehouse there? We look at the maps, and that's a perfect field in the 1920s. It does look like the removal of a hedge bank here, and nothing Roman. So I can't get too excited about that. The church might be interesting. Down near Broadhaven this summer, we did have a linear parch mark. There's Broadhaven, but to the south, not really on the right line, we had a good, clear parch mark, very much like a Roman agate, coming through the fields here. But look, it goes to the gate there, which is not a great indication. These should be ignored by the modern landscape. But it does go under a hedge here and here. But it does lead to a scuffed area of ground here, so it could be a pipe put in by the farmer to water the fields. So by no means certain, one would have to go through the records to have a look what was put in the field there. And knowing that there are a few eyes on Broadhaven and St Bride's Bay for a Roman site, there was a big area of crop marking behind Broadhaven village this summer with at least one archaeological ditch here then plough leveled fields, removal of fields. Here you can see these field boundaries removed, but no Roman fort that I can see at all. But it's good that we take a picture of the field and we create a record for it, so that if in 50 years' time or 100 somebody else is still looking for the Roman fort, they can take that field out of their equation. There's a great value where we have persistent drought for photographing known monuments. There's still some surprises there, as we'll see. This is Lampley Bishop's Palace last July, on 29th of July, which is a real singeing hot day, but with rain falling across central and northern Pembrokeshire, so it was all going to disappear. Now, I haven't done anything to follow this up. I'm not sure if these are quite normal, these lines in Lampley, presumably old gravel paths or drains. But there are some building footings by the looks of it here, and so on. There'll also be the sites of pavilions and so on from summer events. But these are pretty good, but they may just be gravel paths. But it's important to get a record of these sort of buried structures when we're over sites. Similarly, long-lived places like St David's, which hasn't really changed in 1,000 years, we really need to get in there and photograph, just in case there's anything we're not expecting. There's the Bishop's Palace, there's the cathedral, there's all the pasture, the meadows, and a few old earthworks that are always seen within the close here as well. In the drought in 2014, right into the sun, a dreadful photograph, no contrast at all. Not a good time to photograph a building. We can see parch marks at the end of the Bishop's Palace here again. Possible building here, and there are some temporary porter cabins here as well, but these look okay. These look below ground, stony remains below ground. So, you'd expect drains and culverts and so on beneath a big building like this. But it's good to get evidence of these in case anybody's planning some work in the future. Just near St David's, above the cathedral close, we had some interesting crop marks. Again, wouldn't it be nice if it was a Roman fort? But it's not. It looks like a ploughed out field boundary with another one here. But way off the present line of field boundary, so it's quite an early period of enclosure. And it shows this bank here is fairly early as well. So we're getting some sense, potentially the medieval, perhaps a pre-medieval landscape around St David's. Of course, west of St David's as well, there are other eyes, Pete Crane and everybody are focusing on the potential for a Roman fort at White Sands out here, where we have those early records from the 19th century of Roman finds. So in persistent droughts, we're out west between St David's and White Sands Bay, looking to see what we can find. A lot of documentary work on the ground by members of the Jefferson Club and so on over the years. But we know the dunes have had a lot of quarrying in the Second World War, a lot of movement of sand, and there's a golf course and so on as well. And then big parch marks like this, which seem to be a water pipe at Kingston Road, which is a good indication it's a modern structure. And I can't work these things out. These came up in July last year, and I'm not making too much noise about them because there may be something completely false. But it seems to be rectangular parch marks, stony footings, one here, two distinct here. Seems to be 1, 2, 3 distinct rectangular footings here as well. We are looking for early Christian settlements out on White Sands Bay, the first sort of early medieval class of St David's. We are looking for that sort of thing out here. I don't think we've got it, but we've got irregular walls or boundaries linking to it. But it may be a wartime camp, it's difficult to say. But something interesting going on here that will only be resolved by a geophysical survey or excavation. But things did get interesting towards the end of last summer, particularly at Pembroke Castle, flying over on the 29th of July. We're looking over the inner and the outer wall here, and saw something I wasn't expecting to see, which is the footprint of a large stone building within the outer wall here. There's some school children on a visit and a temporary pavilion, but this is not the shape of a temporary pavilion, which would normally leave a sort of parch mark after an event has happened. This looked potentially very interesting, and I emailed it to one castle scholar who offered that it may be a modern mark because you don't have buildings of this scale in the outer walls normally. But then I got in touch with Neil Ludlow, who was very excited because this located a building found back in the 1930s but never properly recorded. What we have here, looking over Pembroke Castle, the Great Keep, the inner wall here, we have building footings, potential lime kilns coming out here, other building footings here, building remains through here, footings, 3 very faint rectangular buildings, which look to be the sites of Nissen huts in the Second World War, and then this massive footings of a huge building here with a stairwell and a separate building block here, just inside the main gate. Highly unusual place for a large building. Now, Neil had often observed and photographed parch marks on the top of the keep, as have other people. They've never been fully sadly vanished due to clearances about 200 years ago, but it's shown on early maps. And Cathcart King in 1978 dismissed this as a sort of rustic occupation of the castle after its slighting. Didn't attach any great importance to it. And Neil had done a lot of digging, and he's working towards a sort of longer study on Pembroke Castle. And Major General Sir Ivor Kipps in 1930-31 had excavated this building. We found at least 2 spiral staircases, building foundations, cellars, and a latrine pit, a very high status find with early 14th century bronze fitting, which suggests this is quite a formal building in its day and not a rustic cottage. And in Cathcart King's plan, we have the vague record of a foundation in this position here, but that's all that's known about it. No plan, no definite location of the building. This is a new plan that we've been able to do of Pembroke Castle from the parch marks. You can see there's quite a few big structures we didn't know about here. This one we were aware of, and more structures we didn't know about. It seems to be there's a large well at F here, which to Neil resolves the problem of water supply in the castle, which has often been discussed. Did it come from the cave outside the walls? Where did it come from? This seems to be a good evidence of a deep well in the outer ward. But what we can do with those parch marks now is stretch them out and correct them to fit the Ordnance Survey map. And here we are, we can get an exact plan view of those building parch marks. We have good wall foundations here, a mass of rubble here, but then very, very thick walls in the centre here with a room and a passage through, stairwell, and a separate building with walls here as well. Now, Neil knows this subject a lot better than I do, and he favours a Tudor mansion, and he's been able to draw up a potential floor plan for this building based on the parch marks with the Great Hall and a solar and pantry and kitchen set transversely to the main range. A separate building across here with a linking wall, potentially with then a medieval garden, which is discussed in early literature in the outer ward. And he likens it to Coffey Manor in Somerset, where you have a distinct block with a transverse arrangement and a separate block away from that hall as well. So it's potential that we have something like this standing in the outer ward, and that linked on the main route from the main gate to the inner gate. That would have taken you past the front door of this Tudor mansion. So it's quite exciting. Perhaps even more exciting, which got Neil very excited indeed, and we're putting it into print. It's come out in the Castle Study Group this summer. Is of course John Leyland in the 1530s records observing the chamber where Henry VII was born in the outer ward. Now, with the clearance of the outer ward, it wasn't until 1833 that Cobbs suggested that the tower, the first floor chamber of the tower, could be Henry VII's birthplace. But he then dropped the idea and kept referring to it by another name. It was only then reinforced back into the 1920s that this being the likely birthplace of Henry VII. With a long historical description, working through all the documentation, Neil is pretty happy now that this Tudor mansion will be where Henry VII was born. And now we can see it, we can understand its floor plan, and perhaps in the future do some further work on it. So a very exciting discovery from a sort of summer of archaeology. So interesting ways that we can change our understanding of even very well-known monuments like Pembroke Castle. Just to finish off, we had some very nice views recorded over Pembrokeshire's airfields. We have photographs of Pembrokeshire airfields from the Second World War, big vertical photographs and plans as well, so we know what they look like. What's interesting, these parch marks over RAF Keat at Dale, particularly here. This is the airfield buildings here have long been cleared, bulldozed away. But what is interesting for these photographs is how much of the intact foundations and footings survive from across the airfield. Building remains, access roads, structures and so on as well. Quite a lot survives below the turf. So rather than being a destroyed or levelled site, we can actually see there's quite a lot of archaeology here. Yes, it's very modern, but if you're excavating the back of the barracks or back of an office, potentially, you may have floor surfaces, you may have artefacts. That's all a very interesting other layer of evidence on top of what we think we know about these air stations as well. But some of the biggest surprises were seen over RNAS Pembroke in 2013. We've seen that in the excellent talk this morning, the airship station there, those enormous airships being launched. Here's the Control Tower Museum down here in the present day. John Evans and Derek Brock have both been very helpful in providing information behind these parch marks here. But RNAS Pembroke, the air station hangars were levelled after the First World War, returned to farmland, and then the whole site was developed in the Second World War with a massive new runways and other infrastructure, which means that the survival of these parch marks is very interesting. Here you can see an access road, concrete plinths or footings here, and other structures, and then areas of solid, stony concrete below the soil, surviving in spite of the fact the Second World War airfield has landed on top of it. Now again, we can rectify or stretch to fit those photographs to the modern map. And here's a photograph Derek Brock sent me here from the same direction. And what you can see here, this is one of the wind turbulent screens here, which is here, the footings of it. That's the mouth of that big hangar here, coming through here. There's the rear hangar and the rear wind turbulent screen at the back here. So you can start to see that's at an early stage in the air station's history. Then we can see another recent map, Alice Piper recently discovered at the Pembrokeshire Record Office, which is a compensation map drawn up for the farmer, I believe, after the air station was mothballed to I have to say, I can't remember this, after it's mothballed or when it was being planned. There's a compensatory map to the landowner showing the precise location of the First World War air station over the field boundaries there. And here we can turn the photograph around. This is a later stage where you can actually match those access roads in quite precisely here. And these two wind turbulent screens here you see showing up nicely there. The great thing about this, I've been talking to John Barry at CADU and the military group as well about this, is that I'm not sure how many First World War air stations exist as intact below ground structures in Wales presently. Not very many, and there are a few remnants in England, but not too many. And where we would have thought perhaps all of this would have vanished, it's actually quite intact below the soil. So potentially a very important aspect of Pembrokeshire's history still intact, despite later development. So it's always interesting to see what parch marks can tell us. Well, the parch marks at Lamphey Palace, Carew Air Station, Pembroke Castle, that was all a flight on the 29th of July 2013, but all the fun has to come to an end, doesn't it? That's coming to land on 29th of July 2013, with heavy rain setting in, and this will make parch marks disappear within a couple of days. So we've had two very busy years. That's a selection of what we came up with. There's much more. We're going into archaeology in Wales next year, or this autumn hopefully as a publication. But many discoveries and much more work to do to find out more about them. I'll leave you with a bit of contact information here, but if you want to find out what's happening week to week in the Royal Commission, what we're doing and so on, do sign up to the Heritage of Wales news blog. You can Google that and get an email update about our latest news. But I hope that's been an interesting roundup for you all. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Toby. Interesting roundup. Well, that's an understatement, isn't it? Absolutely fascinating. And you know, to think the amount of new material that continues to come to light. So we just have to hang on 5 years perhaps, digest this lot, and who knows, next summer might break all the records again. Now we have a bit of time. So does anybody want to just ask a question or make any observation, something they know of, or wish to add to what Toby's told us?
From the back there, I think.
Quite a lot. The other side of this is, as you never show a picture of my farm,
I'll wait till I try next year.
which is just on the other side of the road to Clegg Camaeth, I have thought of buying one of these drones. I don't want to watch Syria or anybody. Is it worth looking into? Because it'd be quite interesting to sort of look over my fields and see if there's anything there.
The first one, we did have a couple of sites, new sites around Clegg Camaeth, a couple of defended enclosures. We haven't had time to put them in. There's more to do in North Pembrokeshire there as well. But the drones are amazing pieces of kit. I mean, they're sort of £50 upwards really, and I can't see any reason not to get one really. but you know, many people are buying them just for their own pleasure and enjoyment, and the quality is so good. You know, it's a good thing to have in the back shed really to pull out on a sunny day.
Right, so Christmas presents then. Yes, well, not.
Hi, Lynn Rasman from Pembroke and London Local History Society. Fascinated about the photographs of Pembroke Castle, but did you photograph Monkton Priory?
Yes, I would have photographed Monkton Priory there. Is that to the west with the dovecotes on that?
Yes.
That's it, yeah. There's a few odd anomalies there, but nothing too definite that I can see. But these photographs are just the highlights of quite long flights. You know, we saturate the fields if they're parched, we'll take a photograph. Photographs aren't online available yet, they're not being catalogued, but you can certainly drop us a line and ask if we've got any new inventory of it. I don't remember seeing anything brand new there, but we've got shots of it.
I think that's Toby.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Very quick point. Graham Phillips of Pembroke. Very interested in the point you make about the well. In Cromwell's time, the water was said to have come in, probably from Monkton with clay pipes. And the man that actually divulged that to Cromwell was hung. So it's a point worth considering. At that time, the water supply to the castle was thought to have come in from Monkton.
I know Neil Ludlow's working on a big study. I know he's got Carmarthen Castle out of the way. He's turning his attention to Pembroke that day.
The big question is, if there was a well in regular period, why was it the use discontinued and water brought in externally unless the well didn't provide enough water?
Yeah, very good point, very good. Much more work to